I'll see you for the next Elden Ring. And I'll see you for the next Elden Ring Wait. Why, hello there. Today is day 730. That is 730 days since Elden Ring was first announced at E3 2019, and this is the Elden Wait. We are 2 days out from the Summer Game Fest kickoff on June 10th, and we are hoping to see Elden Ring there, and I've been doing a number of Q&As. This is Q&A number 5. You guys have been asking some awesome questions, and they keep coming. Keep them coming. Keep the discussions up in the chat. It's been really fun, and I think it's a nice way to pass the time as we are hoping for a gameplay trailer at SGF. And speaking of SGF and speaking of Jeff Keighley, before we get into questions today, I just wanted to briefly address, so Jeff Keighley, who's the host and creator of the Summer Game Fest kickoff, he did an AMA on Reddit yesterday. And that was, he had some answers that were concerning for some people. And I want to bring up sort of the focus of people's concern. So, Garbear119 asked, how many Elden Ring questions are you expecting today? And Jeff answered, it seems like a lot of people are curious about that game. Me too. I am very hopeful we will get to see more about it sometime soon, but I know it's been really hard this past year for developers, especially in Japan, given work from home situations. So, this response from Jeff has made some people nervous because it kind of sounds like a hype killer. And, the thing is Jeff has been sort of teasing back and forth. And the interesting thing about this is that this is almost word for word an answer he gave around TGA 2020 when people were asking and he was doing a response. I couldn't find it, but I know that I've read these words from Jeff before. And so it's just interesting that he's using a similar phrasing there. And the thing is, for me, that Jeff isn't going to confirm or deny either way unless he has the go-ahead or he wants to announce it officially. And it's not going to be on a Reddit AMA. It would be something posted up on his own terms. So I'm not concerned by what Jeff is saying, and the reason is because I'm not staking Jeff's answers on it, because following Jeff's answers as a confirmation or denial of it being at SGF is just too much of a roller coaster for me. So and Omnipotent seems very confident that it will show up, and for a few other reasons I'm feeling very confident without receiving a 100% confirmation. I am about as confident as I can be that it will be at SGF. And if not, it'll break me a little bit inside, but it may show up over the next few days. If we get past June 15th, where there's supposed to be some Bandai Namco stuff being shown at E3, then yeah, I'll turn to dust and, have to take a break from Elden Ring content until they pop up again. But I am feeling extremely confident that it is going to show up at SGF. And if it doesn't, then, I don't know why or why not, but there's just so many more positive signs than there are negatives. Like, the biggest example I want to give for people is that for TGA 2020, where a lot of people were saying, it's going to show up, Omnipotent was like the one person who was like, I'm not sure. I haven't really heard anything. And then, talking with him, that continued to be true. I did not heed that as a red flag. And I was like, well, other people are saying it's going to show up, so I think it's going to show up at TGA 2020. It, of course, did not. And, from then on, I was like, I'm just going to listen to what Omnipotent is saying because he's been reliable in the past. And so for Omnipotent to be excited, that is sort of the source of my excitement. And without getting 100% confirmation, he's just, from what he's posted, from what I helped him with the meme, like, he's not doing these things because he's not getting pretty strong signals that it will show up. So, so keep an eye there. Maybe Omnipotent will, if he speaks again, that's even more confidence there, and everyone can continue riding the roller coaster. But I just wanted to point that out there. I'm not panicking. Nothing has really changed for me here. It is always tough with Jeff because he wants to hype up his events And, but he also wants to, be a little bit of a tease, but also not too much. So it's really hard to read what he's doing. I love Jeff. I think he's a great host, and I would really love for him to have Elden Ring because I think that would be the number one person I want to show it off. I think this would be a great show for Elden Ring to really shine, and I'm looking forward to it. I will be live streaming it once again on Thursday, so we can all tune in together. But with that, let's jump into some questions. So Kramach, I think Kramach, the Hopeful Hollow from Discord, and Daniel K from YouTube asked similar questions about what do I think the respawn checkpoint system will be in Elden Ring and just in this new open world environment and how that will affect the overall gameplay. And that's a really good question because that's a really big question for me is what the open world play structure will feel like. What you're doing moment to moment. Like if you have static bonfires, which seems the most likely just given what we've heard and what I've heard about, it seems likely, as much as I really like the idea of like the portable bonfire, I don't know if that's going to be a thing. And therefore, if they're static and chosen from, then the spacing really does imply quite a bit in how they managed to put that out there. And also if fast travel is a factor in that. Because, if you have fast travel, I would want them to be pretty far spaced apart. I think a good example is like Breath of the Wild, where they have fast travel and they have, sort of your spawn locations. They have saving and stuff on top of that, so it's different. But they also have some control over the approach. I think From would like to limit your approach and, be able to have some control just to make sure that, you get yourself in interesting situations that they can design with certain things in mind, certain approaches for certain vistas. There's a lot of reasons why they would maybe want to have very limited, if they have static bonfires or whatever the equivalent is, that those are spaced out in a way so that you are kind of approaching from different areas and that they're still having you traverse the world. Because also that space between checkpoints is then how much time do you want to be in the world? In an open world, I would think they want you to be in the open world because otherwise, what's the point? And I think then, especially with exploration being a big thing, that they would want to give you that tension of being sort of far away from all of your safety nets. And, then you start to think about night and day and how much of a consideration that is and getting back to, a safe spot for night. I think there's a lot of factors that play into this, especially when you're going from something like bonfires being part of these static, interconnected, but otherwise like corridor type levels to really being these organically placed things. It's like the difference between going from like a 2D space to a 3D space. And I think it's a big factor. And I kind of hope that if they have them, they're very limited in nature, especially if there is any type of fast travel, especially if that's available immediately. And I would really want that to be something where you can really be out in the wilderness because that's when exploration gets fun. That's why for me, for Dark Souls 2 and 3, you always felt like you were trying to get to the next bonfire because that was your safe zone. But then once you got there, the tension is gone. And in Dark Souls 1, it's similar where it's a safe zone, but because for the first half of the game you can't travel out, you still have that feeling of being away from safety. And I really want that feeling. I think that's a big part of why Dark Souls 1 feels like that sense of exploration, especially when you're down in like Blight Town. You're really far away from what feels safe to you. And that's a good feeling. That there's a lot of tension there, and I would love to have that feeling in Elden Ring, especially if exploration is important to them, then I would think they would want that tension of being away from your safety net. Jackson B from YouTube asks, do you think Elden Ring will start a new trilogy like Dark Souls, or a one-off game more like Sekiro or Bloodborne? It's interesting with Sekiro and Bloodborne, there is both with, with Bloodborne was with Sony, and Sekiro was with Activision, so if we're going purely off of precedent, I think there's more potential with Bandai Namco just because Bandai Namco did want sequels. And I think it's more likely that they're doing that something with them that Bandai Namco would ask for sequels again. The other thing is just that they're if they're tackling this open world, they're really doing something different for them, and they're working with George R. R. Martin to craft this world. It might be something where they want to create a longer running story and have sequels. And I'm not saying that purely because like in the leak trailer it mentions franchise, um, but just because they're putting a lot into this. It's a huge project and it's taking them a while to develop, and you would want to get some dividends from that and be able to like use that. And if this is sort of the next you know in their long line of like series, like you had Kingsfield and then into you have Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and then you go into Elden Ring. If that's the sort of the next step, I could see there being sequels. The thing is I would actually want them to go into it with sequels in mind and have something that's sort of an overarching story in mind, just because I think part of the thing is I think Dark Souls, I don't know how it played out, but I don't know if the story of Dark Souls was made with sequels in mind. And I think it would benefit them just to have a little bit of that like in their head as they're designing, just so that the themes and the story do give some, hooks to continue on, even if it's something farther down the line, just so that the world lends itself. So I don't think it necessarily having sequels is a bad thing. I do think that From Software works best with like a blank slate. And so for me personally, I would be fine with it being a one off. But I also am just trying to think practically of the odds of them investing so much in this like open world and figuring out this system and then not doing anything more with it. Because Bloodborne and Sekiro were made by kind of the same team with Hamatami involved, and they're both smaller scope games in some ways. Bloodborne did have some it was had some development challenges, but they were both slightly smaller scope games. Whereas this is coming from seemingly a much larger team, and they're coming off of like a Dark Souls size production, so um, it just lends itself. It just seems like the stars are aligning in such a way that this is the most likely we've seen to get a sequel. I'm not really sure, but if they do, I would love for them to sort of not like sequel hooks or like leave off some information just to continue it. But I think it would be nice for them to design with that in mind. And I think from like Bandai Namco's standpoint, if they could get 3 games where they could say George R. R. Martin helped develop the mythos, that would be really appealing versus just one, because it's a pretty rare opportunity, I would think, and they could just do more with that. But we'll have to see. I think it depends on how the game does, regardless, and how it works out, and sort of what the team wants to do. Even if Miyazaki isn't the main dude, because I think if Miyazaki, I would love for him to just work on what he wants. But if he thinks he has something else to say, great. Otherwise, I would love for them personally to move on to different projects. But I know that that's not always feasible, and, because creating a new IP is a lot of work, and especially if they're creating any new systems or stuff that they might want to keep in the future. But it's tough because you would think too that maybe Bloodborne and Sekiro, they were doing enough new stuff that they would want to capitalize on that, but it seemingly they haven't so far. So we will see, but I think this is the most likely to get a sequel of anything that we have out there by From Software right now. Sins asks from YouTube, just started watching the channel. My question is, do you think they will make clear ties or Easter eggs to Berserk, especially after the unfortunate passing of Mira? I think the Berserk references in their games are already pretty clear and pretty almost one-to-one Easter eggs sometimes, especially for like visual designs. But anything, I think they will continue to do that. You can already see like with the Valkyrie that they're very similar character design from someone Berserk, also similar to someone from Nausicaa. So there's multiple things at play there, but I think it would be cool. I'm sure just the fact that the team and From Software, especially through Dark Souls, has made so many references. I'm sure that the tragic passing of Mira is hitting them hard, and I feel for them, and I feel for the whole community, because it's special because Berserk is something so special, and then Dark Souls is also very special to a lot of the same people. If you're a big fan of Dark Souls, there's a good chance you're a fan of Berserk, it seems. So it is tough, and I think it would be really touching. I personally would welcome, a little nod, just because it's been such a big influence on their works that I know some people get sensitive about any sort of fan service or nods, but like that's how From is, and if they feel compelled to throw a little something even more blatant in there just to say like this was important, then I say go for it. I know the community would be all behind it, and whatever strikes them creatively, I think that's what they should do. Capital Chowder asks, what do you expect the main/default humanoid enemies to be? Do you think they'll just be hostile soldiers, or will they be undead/corrupted by the shattering of the Elden Ring? That's a good question. And it's one that's very speculative considering how little we know. But so let's think about what we do know. The Elden Ring has shattered. It controls reality, and that probably has messed stuff up pretty badly. We hear that Omnipotent in his post talked about how what happens when people transform because of the shattering. What happens when this thing that controls so many parts of life shatter, and then so developing this idea, and it's sort of speculation on my part, but this idea of maybe you see people cracking, growth and decay not working like it should. I think that you could have some sort of fantasy like maybe they're still humans, not versus like undead like zombies, but I had this idea of like what if when you're supposed to die, because of the ring shattering, you just continue living on when you should have died. And that may sound cool at first, but also what happens when your arm breaks off and because decay and growth are all messed up, it just doesn't grow back. Now you just don't have that arm, but you're also not dying from it. You're just continuing on. And then what happens as things like just minor accidents in life? What happens if every time you get a scratch, that crack just stays? And that's horrifying. And I could see that being something where people are just degrading. They're just breaking apart. And that being sort of a main default humanoid enemy is just people, from the ring who are just, maybe that drives you mad. Maybe they are sort of zombie-like, but that's about as good as I can guess right now. I'm not totally sure. I think, especially if everything with the kingdoms and stuff pans out, I think you might see a lot more like knights and soldiers from specific kingdoms, certain heraldry, certain symbols, but I don't know, From Software has also said this is sort of, you're going to like ruins, dungeons sort of thing, like they're sort of normal stees. So the people who are here are either on a mission or they're the tragic remains of whatever happened here in the Riftlands, whatever the Riftlands are like. So yeah, so I could see that what you're saying about the corrupting or shattering being the thing that sort of does define your sort of typical enemy as the sort of these humanoids, sort of zombies, but like it's because of the shattering that they're not right. All right, now to round out today's episode, I have a few questions, sort of regarding the content of the trailer from Matthew Holt, Totally Not Jarrett, and Ahmed Yusri from YouTube. And question from Matthew is, if they show the trailer and it has a date and it's come out this year, when do you think we would get it? My total speculative guess is October 22nd, 2021. If it's a 2021 game, that is my guess because it's not right in the holidays, but it's pretty close to the holiday. It gives them enough time. It's close enough to the end of the year while still being able to make sales. It's a Friday. I think this will be an international release, hopefully. And so October 22nd, because then the next week would be October 29th. I think that's getting close to November and maybe when they would want to have it out, but it could still be then. But I see something in like the October, November range if it was to be a 2021 game. And then Totally Not Jarrett asks, if Elden Ring gets shown off at SGF, what do you expect to see in the trailer? I've discussed this a little bit before, and I've made a whole bingo card off of it. I actually need to double check that just to see what I have written if I want to change anything. But I think they really, and that it needs to be a gameplay trailer, not a cinematic trailer, because that would be crazy to me if they showed off another cinematic trailer. A gameplay trailer that shows us what the open world is like. For open world being like kind of the biggest thing about this game that we know, the announcement trailer doesn't show any of that. And I think it's their time to show off different vistas, sort of their variety of landscapes, and to give us an idea of what the combat, especially mounted combat and mounted movement, they need to show that off. And I think just they need to show how it is different from Dark Souls. I think is sort of an implied thing, is they need to show what makes it unique a little bit, whether that's some new magic. That's why I think showing you the combat on the horse and sort of how that might work. They're not going to be able to get into any details, but if they can tease those things and give a quick shot of just some differences and some mechanics, I think that's the big thing. And then, yeah, of course, showing the open world, maybe not giving a total feeling of what it's like playing in the open world, but definitely some good shots of variety to just sort of get a feeling of what the world's like. I feel like interviews or an unedited gameplay segment is where we would actually start to understand the moment-to-moment gameplay. So this is more for action shots, but I think that they would still want to show a variety of landscapes and you doing a variety of activities. They would want to show the day-night cycle in action, so perhaps similar locations shown with different lighting. Some of the stuff we saw from the leaked trailer, but just, more of that. And obviously in more than 144p. So I do think that of showing a variety of landscapes and just getting an idea of the scale of the world is something that I would imagine would be a pretty central focus for them. So those are my general thoughts, is that. And then of course I think there will be, I think there will be a release date of whether or not that's a specific date or a window. I think if they're going this long, like, I don't really mean this, but like almost like when you show me stuff, I just want to have like the release date and have a window in mind and just see things rolling. If we got this and then it's like no date at the end, I feel like that's a little disappointing because we've been waiting so long already. You give something, otherwise just wait until you know. And I feel like they have to kind of know at this point because they don't have endless time to work on the game. And from everything I've heard, it sounds like the game is ready to rock and roll. So give us that date, maybe even a day and date, instead of a window. But let's see it. That's what I want to see from this trailer. And then Ahmed Yusri asked, do you think the next trailer will be cinematic or focus on gameplay? And I answered that. I think at most they would have like in-engine cutscenes, sort of like the Sekiro gameplay trailer, but they're not like a CGI, like a pure cinematic. I don't think they would be advisable, and I don't think that they will do that. So, and there you have it. That is the Q&A for today. I would love to hear your responses to these questions, any other questions you might have. Tomorrow will be the final Q&A number 6 before SGF on Thursday. And so get them in now. I'll try to get to as many as I can. And so tune in for the next Elden Wait tomorrow and keep commenting and leaving questions because there have been some really good discussions in there. In fact, there's a good discussion happening in Q&A number 4. What are numbers? Yeah, Q&A number 4, which is about just the idea of a disconnected versus a central hub and just like what we want based off of a question that I answered. I think there's a lot of good discussion there because, it is nice for a hub like Firelink to be in the world and for it to be this hub in the sense that you keep returning to it. But on the other hand, as an open world game, how the interconnectivity may still exist, but more to adjacent spaces, the scale of the world may not lend itself towards wrapping back on itself, at least in the same way that Dark Souls 1 did. But there's some good discussion in there, and so check that out, and that'll be awesome stuff to look at as we get further into development and getting information. So all good things. So yeah, the comments do go read, and there's some good discussions happening in there. So check that out, and I'll see you for the next Elden Wait.